Radio, nothing but truth. Nothing but truth. We've talked a lot about Benghazi, and we're going to talk a little more about it, specifically right now with our guest. He is the senior legal analyst at the Heritage Foundation. He is also the director of election reform at Heritage Action. He's written a book about election reform and actually just participating and getting involved. Who's counting? The man who exposed the race-neutral policy being abandoned. Highlighted that. His friend exposed it. J. Christian Adams in the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. Our good friend Hans von Spakovsky. Hans, welcome back.
Well, thanks, Crane. You know, I was listening to your opening, Ronald Reagan saying government is the problem. And, you know, that's just as true today as it was 30 years ago.
You know, it's funny. In 97-1, when I was back doing Nothing But Truth and another formation years back, I would change that. You know, I would change it every year. There's no reason to change. It's just true. And Thank you for doing that, and appreciate you recognizing it. It is the problem, but here is another problem. It's called a press corps that is so slanted toward the left that they'll just laugh hysterically when the press actually does its job and demands accountability. Listen to Jonathan Karl the other day. Roll it.
I just wanted to...
You want to ask me again?
Yeah. Actually, I just want to direct...
You're going to definitely get it out of me, that's for sure.
Yes or no answer.
Go, John.
Is the White House going to cooperate with this investigation? Yes or no? I heard a lot of
First of
words,
all, I
but
haven't
didn't
seen
hear
an
answer.
investigation. I've seen a lot of rhetoric. I've seen talk. I've seen some of the usual partisan
You've seen the
assertions and
Speaker
heard
of the
them.
House is creating this committee to
And what
investigate
I
this.
will say is that we have a long history of cooperating with legitimate oversight from Congress.
I heard
And
you say
that
I heard all
cooperation will continue. What I am not going to speculate about is what what the Republicans are up to. It's pretty blatantly apparent based on what they've said and what even other Republicans have said, that this is a highly partisan exercise. But I'm not going to go further than that.
Well, as Newsbusters points out in the recent poll being taken over the last 10 years, the amount of Democrats to Republican ratio has gone from 2-to-1 to 4-to-1. We'll get more on that. I want to ask you to explain this for us. The Benghazi Select Committee, what exactly, how does this change? Because we've had 4 investigations going. That's true, but they haven't been connected. Now we have the appointment of a select committee in the House. What does this mean, Hans?
Well, it's something that should have been done a long time ago. Yes, there have been a number of committees investigating Benghazi, but the problem is when you have more than one committee investigating a particular incident, they often interfere with each other, and all of these regular committees have many other duties. You know, they have many other issues they're looking at. Having a select committee means you've got one committee. Its only purpose is to investigate a particular incident. That means everyone on it, the staff, are all focused on that one case, and that's exactly what should be done when it comes to investigating Benghazi and how in the world it came about that 4 Americans were brutally murdered by terrorists.
Hans, I want to ask more about that, obviously, and get your thoughts, but real quick with the committee, give me the parameters of jurisdiction and being able to call people to testify under oath, subpoena power.
Well, the parameters of it will be determined by the resolution that is passed by the House setting up the committee. I mean, you know, the Speaker's already said he's doing it. He's already said that Trey Gowdy's going to be the head, but they still have to pass a resolution setting it up. That'll all be defined there. But they certainly will have the ability to call witnesses, to interview them under oath, and to subpoena documents and individuals to come in and testify. And if they refuse to do it, like, as you know, Lois Lerner has in another situation, they'll be able to vote to hold them in contempt.
Okay. Now, and I know you've addressed this in a wonderful primer. We're grateful in Talk Radio, and I'll just speak for myself. I love you guys at heritage.org. It's awesome, and I especially appreciate your work because you bring us an explanation of what's happening and make it understandable. So they don't cooperate with the contempt citation. What happens? What is the follow-through?
Well, I'll tell you what's supposed to happen, but likely will not. What's supposed to happen is when the House holds someone in contempt, that contempt citation is forwarded to the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia. And under an applicable federal statute, it says the U.S. Attorney shall, it's not maybe, but shall, present that citation to a federal grand jury so they can move on it. The U.S. Attorney refused to do that back when Eric Holder was held in contempt by the House. So if, as is likely, Eric Holder once again acts politically and refuses to present a contempt citation from the Select Committee to a federal grand jury, then it'll be up to the House to hire its own lawyers and to go to court to enforce the contempt citation against a particular witness.
How long does that take? And with this particular select committee, is it open beyond the election cycle?
Yeah, I suspect they're going to set up a resolution that basically says that the select committee will remain in place until it has completed its investigation. And unfortunately, yeah, it can take quite a bit of time for the contempt citation to work its way through the courts, although I suspect the House's lawyers will be doing everything they can to try to get the judges to expedite the case.
What about Nancy Pelosi? First, Benghazi. I recognize she's probably not getting enough protein. I mean that with respect. Oftentimes I'm quite disrespectful, and it's rare that I am disrespectful to Nancy Pelosi, but her comments obviously yield a very emotional knee-jerk reaction from me sometimes. I'm working on it. I'm praying. Thank you, Jesus. But here's the deal. Last week, Benghazi. What is all this about with the general testifying? I couldn't believe it, but having said that, now we need equal part Democrat-Republican split on the select committee. What is the background to this? I understand she has a background with these types of committees when she was Speaker of the House. Now she's the minority leader calling for equal representation. What would that mean? And for those saying, hey, this sounds pretty fair, why not do it?
Well, if over the past year and a half, Democrats had been showing that they actually wanted to investigate this, well then, yeah, I could see the call for equal representation. But in fact, they have done nothing but try to stop investigations. They have shrugged it off. They have said there's no need to look at these 4 Americans being killed, looking at any of the background of how it happened, why it wasn't prevented. And frankly, look, if I was the leader of the House, which I certainly am not, I would not give them equal representation because I would be seriously concerned that the only thing they would do would be to try to stop the investigation from going forward.
With that, is that if there are equal members, and we've seen the types of questions one side or the other, it's run out the clock. It reminds me of Mizzou basketball in the 80s. There's a reference for you. Just running it out, no shot clock. Here's the deal. When I see that, I think, okay, if they did have equal representation, would they be able to thwart the investigation of signing off to conclusions? Would that be a part of it?
Yeah, they would try to do it, and yeah. I'm sure that even if they were a minority, not equal representation, they would probably write some kind of minority report that disagreed with the findings, so they would want to make sure that the majority's findings, if they're bad for the administration, don't have a political effect.
Real quick, they can call Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Could they call the President of the United States?
Well, that would be extremely unusual and a very rare occurrence. I think that would be entirely up to the president whether he wants to accede to it. I don't think they would have the ability to force him in to testify. On the other hand, the Secretary of State, former Secretary of State, yes, they could subpoena and they could force there.
So climate and climate change. John Podesta speaking to this the other day, in fact, with Jay Carney yesterday, speaking to the power of the EPA. I want to get that ready. Why don't we roll that?
I'd say that probably look out your window and you'll begin to feel the effects. But 97% of scientists agree there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that exists, that climate change is real, it's happening, it's caused by the CO2 pollution and other pollutants that we're putting into our air that cause climate change. It's well-known science now. The data continues to come in. If anything, we're seeing some of the effects that are predicted by the models coming in more quickly than were predicted in the models that existed even a decade ago. So I think if you want to try to, particularly if you're want to try to side with the polluters and argue to the American public that climate change is not happening today, tomorrow, and certainly in the future, that's going to be a losing argument.
Congress can't stop global warming, so says the Daily Caller, but this is about the EPA and the rules and the assessment that was delivered today, and we'll have more on that a little later. Your thoughts on White House counsel John Podesta's comments? You can weigh in on the climate, but also, obviously, the power of the EPA and the Congress's ability to stop rulemaking authority, especially in light of the recent Supreme Court decision.
Well, almost every word out of John Podesta's mouth was untrue. I mean, everything from the fact that there's been almost no change in world temperatures for, close to 2 decades, and the climate models set up are so bad and have been so far removed from the actual reality of what has happened that, in fact, there are many, many scientists who doubt all the claims that he has made. He must hope that the November elections are not a disaster for the Democrats, as people are starting to predict, because I can tell you that if the Republicans take over the Senate and have 2 houses of Congress, there's all kinds of control they may have over what EPA is doing, including, most importantly, control over their budget. So that the president directs EPA to do things that Congress disagrees with, the best thing that Congress will be able to do is cut their budget in major ways until they stop that kind of behavior.
Hans, this is more of a general prediction. Do you believe that the Democrats will participate in the Benghazi Select Committee?
I think they will. I think it will be very tough for them to stay out of it, because every time they try to make claims like Nancy Pelosi did, I think they look really bad, because it all boils down to, this isn't some normal scandal. This is a situation where 4 Americans were brutally murdered. And nothing has been done about it since then. None of the individuals who committed this act of terrorism have been caught. And the idea that we shouldn't investigate this and find out what happened, I think makes them look really bad.
Hans von Spakovsky, Senior Legal Analyst, Heritage Foundation, Manager Election Reform at Heritage Action, author of Who's Counting. Great to be with you. Going to have you back on. Another request is coming, just warning you, for the update on the IRS and where we are. Thank you so much. Great to be with you.
Thank you, Crane.
Take care. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. On the flip side, a little run through of the day's top stories and what they mean to you. We'll have a little more on the happenings of yesterday's press conference, White House press conference. Interesting. Jonathan Karl attacked by another reporter, so-called. And the latest on the media bias, 2-1 to 4-1, Democrats outnumber Republicans. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth will bring you the rest of the story on that study next. AFR Talk.